A very warm welcome to Thomas and Ian. Thank you both very much for joining us on stage to talk about your latest short film, Heal. And so I just have to start by asking, are you both dog owners? Do you have dogs yourself?
I do have a dog, actually. She's a sausage dog, Edwina. She's 8, but we've got also a second sausage dog now who is called Arlo, no relation. And he's just a guest at the moment. He's only 3, so it's a bit like, I think you could call it the graduate at our house. We've got Anne Bancroft as Edwina and Dustin Hoffman as Arlo there.
And Edwina was fine with your performance with Arlo? That was okay?
She's okay with
that
it
was
so
okay?
far. Yeah, she seems ambivalent, I should say. But no, they're very fun, good fun dogs. But I would have been an animal person generally. I'm kind of, animals quite like me.
And of course yourself, Thomas, are you?
Not currently, but lifelong dog lover, and obviously drew a lot of inspiration from my bond with my sort of family dog growing up through my adolescence and sort of young adult years. So I think I've got my parents here as well, so they'll know how important that bond was, and it was absolutely a family member. Mike was his name, Mike Wazowski, after Monsters, Inc. So
excellent name choices.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to assume that this is based on your experience with your childhood experience with your dog?
Probably, again, more a reflection on the end of that relationship. As I said, it was sort of young adult, so I was living out of home at the time, and Mike sort of passed due to sort of an unknown sort of medical issue. It was quick, it was painless, but it sort of caught us all by surprise. So I just got a call the next day letting me know what had happened. So it was just sort of a bit of a weird experience to just go from one day to the next, and suddenly someone who'd been a big part of my life just sort of vanished from it. So that's definitely a big part of what I'm sort of reflecting on there. So, yeah.
And I suppose in that sense, I was very curious. I think in some ways, narratively, you could have done perhaps a story set in the present where it maybe just flashes back to the past. But I loved that you went to the future. And I think that's a really interesting narrative decision. And would you be comfortable telling us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think it was always going to be that way, and I think that's partly because by the time we joined Doug, there's already sort of the idea of time travel is fairly well established and it has its own history, and it always made it easier and made more sense to build that moving forward from now as opposed to going into the past. I think then you start having to ask people to change what they know about the present and the past. An alternate history can be a lot of fun, but it starts to ask questions that I didn't really want people asking. So this is obviously not going to happen, but it's supposed to exist in our world. I have a future somewhere in this. Everyone here has a future somewhere in this world. So, yeah.
No, I think that's really interesting. And when we use words like future and science fiction, our brains immediately go to, big explosions and aliens and UFOs. And we think about these really sort of neon-drenched visions of the future. And what really struck me is how this was more what I would suggest is lo-fi sci-fi. So it's more that kind of, it doesn't rely on big special effects and it doesn't rely on big visual effects. And in fact, you would actually not necessarily even know it was set in the future until you see some of those lovely touches. Like I couldn't help but smile at the chipped Brisbane 32 cup. It was just a very lovely touch and just a lovely way to position us as viewers and audience members as well. And so I think part of that as well on reflection is I was really interested why you chose to shoot the film in a rural location. I think rural locations are quite fascinating by their nature. They are almost anachronic. They almost exist out of time. And so I'm really curious to understand why you decided to choose that as a location.
Funnily enough, I think the location, which is out at the scenic rim, I imagine most people here would probably recognise that mountain range. The location was sort of one of the first things that came together for the project, and so it's absolutely true to say that that location informed the story more than the story informed the location. I think for doing genre fare, which I'm a big lover of, I grew up on science fiction films and the rest of it, it doesn't immediately come to mind as the backdrop for sort of the ideas that I tend to come up with. And I think as I've gotten older and a bit more mature, I start to see that as a bit of a uniqueness about sort of filming here in Australia, is we've got something different to offer and a different story to tell and something different to see. So that'll help with that. But more in terms of telling a sci-fi story that was probably more interested in the introspective, I think it helped probably ground the film, something we could recognise and establish ourselves in. I think most of us would sort of recognise that environment, so it becomes across as a bit more normal.
And so, Ian, I hope you don't mind me saying, you of course won an award for this performance, which I think is a very worthy award.
Two
awards, in fact, 2 awards.
My first award in 42 years of trying to be an actor. It was just...
So very, very well deserved. And I hope you don't mind me saying, I think this was probably a very beneficial and good collaboration between the two of you. So how did you come about finding one another for the film?
How did we, it goes back? Well, we did a film before this called Pieces, which was 4 minutes long or something like that.
Very, very short, 3 minutes.
I jumped into that at some point, and then this came up, and being that I think it was Vanessa Redgrave said to me once, don't do an audition or something like that. Anyway, so I always do auditions, and I always do say yes. So I said yes, and then I read the script. And then it said, 59 scenes, 4 days. What could go wrong?
Oh, nothing, especially not when working with time. No. And of course, speaking of time, when did you film this? What year did you film this?
April 22. It was just as COVID was coming in and there were people dropping in and out of stuff. And it was a weekend away. A mad weekend away.
It was sorry, I didn't mean to go.
No, just up in the country. Do you want to go to the countryside for the weekend and get away? And it was great, like 7 or 8 people, and so everyone didn't have COVID, so we could just chill for a bit. I think.
We did it right at the sort of tail end of COVID, and that was sort of a known risk, sort of going out to do the shoot. In fact, it had to be, the whole shoot had been postponed once already because someone had become a close contact, but we thought we'd be safe out in the sort of rural sticks.
And we ate sandwiches there and stayed there, and we were okay.
Until the end. Someone who we thought had dust and dog allergies was actually coming down with COVID right at the end. So there were a number of casualties, but that was after the shoot, and hadn't we known that it was COVID, we probably would have been forced to shut down the shoot. I don't know if we ever would have got back at it. So ignorance is probably slightly a bit of bliss there, but she had known dust and dog allergies, so it all seemed perfectly explainable.
Why not film with dogs? Yes.
So many hazards of working with animals. And just speaking of the production itself, I mean, often we hear stories of films and they need to be shot out of sequence. So often there's this sort of, you sometimes film the end before the beginning and so on and so forth. And I think there's something really lovely about that echoing narratively what's going on, moving between time. So I'm just really curious, would you mind telling us...
Would you describe it as lovely, Ian?
I don't remember. I started off, we got this lovely script and it had first scene, stretching, yes, done that one, great. Second scene, having breakfast, yes, I've done breakfast before, I can do that scene. Then dead dog scene, we've lost a guinea pig once, we can do that scene. And now, what in this scene next, what happens, Tom? I haven't done this scene yet. He said, don't worry about it, it's a scene before, we haven't shot it yet. And you go, because the idea is you're supposed to remember what you did the scene before so you can kind of carry it through into the next scene. That was what I was taught at drama school. And this one was like, look, it's 5 years ago and we haven't shot that scene yet, so just do what I say. And I go, okay, sure, I'll do that one. And then I try to be clever and think, every time I shoot a scene now, I'll remember the end of it so that when he says we're shooting that scene next, I can remember what I did in that last scene. And then he'd say, look, it was 5 years ago, don't worry about it, it's okay. I got so lost, the script went away and I just waited and said, what's next? What's next, Tom? And you'd say, just do that, we'll do this. And literally we went from moment to moment, and it was... Because normally you do like a scene in the morning and then you have lunch and do a scene in the afternoon. This was 59 scenes in 4 days. bang, 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 bang.
They're all very quick and short, but any film is sort of scheduled around like logistics. So quite often it's deeply unfair to the performers, but you sort of have to sort of make it work. So you tend to jump around, and that was just exacerbated by a couple factors.
There wasn't a lot of dialogue. Now I've looked at it again. It's a bit like sort of Shaun the Sheep with my role. So it literally was, what's the next scene? Oh, this is the scene where you go, arr. And so we did a lot of that. There was lines. I did have a few lines in there, but generally speaking, it was just go with this feeling, Ian. Go with that one.
So was it a bit like art imitating life? You know, the scene where Doug has all the Post-it notes and is trying to run around town. Was that like on set?
Sometimes I just said, I actually don't know how this is going to fit in, but I trust you because you knew it inside out.
I'm very grateful. I had Ian's trust and enthusiasm, which I don't think this would have worked if I didn't, and that meant I had to do...
Yes, Doug would have never have done that. No, I never ever said that, I don't think, apart from maybe the bottle chucking in after the pouring, because I'm an avid recycler, but Doug chucked, he's got tractors and everything there.
But you had to have great trust in me, and in return I had to make sure I'd done my homework.
And you did.
Yeah. The amount of diagrams, tables and everything I did so I could keep track of where every scene was at any given time. It helps I'd written the script, so I had a very sort of intricate understanding, but we had documents. I had a timeline. I know exactly when on the timeline every scene takes place. I had a document for every costume in every scene, and when it's later in the day than a previous scene and stuff like that. And all this is just so it remains accurate. It's not supposed to be a film that asks the audience to sort of keep track of that as long as they're sort of following emotionally. But yes, I definitely had to rely on your trust, and thank you for giving it to me.
Oh, welcome.
I mean, earlier we were talking about that sort of lo-fi sci-fi. Something that also really stood out to me was the device itself, that time travel device. I just loved how it had that essence of a mass market device. You could go into a gadget shop and pick one up, and I enjoyed how it was just sort of considered, this is future technology, this is what's going to happen. But it was also so incredibly slick to look at on screen. Could you talk to us a bit about how you came up with the concept, how you came up with the look?
Yeah, I think that it's probably more informed by the story we were telling, because Doug is someone who sort of resigns to time travel, not someone who actively partakes in it. So it never really made sense for it to be something he built for himself. And once that sort of fell into place, the idea that it's something that works out of the box and can be bought sort of informed the rest of it. And then it became a bit fun to sort of follow that through to its logical conclusion. What if Microsoft or Apple built a device like this? What would it look like? And obviously extrapolating out a lot of the things we deal with our current technology, our phones and stuff, the idea of terms and services, financing, iterative models, which I find particularly humorous considering the passage of time doesn't really matter much to the company building it. And then like power management cables and stuff like that. I had to be very careful not to get carried away with that because, again, what I was talking about is keeping the film about Doug and his sort of introspective experience and stuff like that. So had to be careful not to get carried away with it. And obviously the other side of that is we're assuming that in this universe it's a utopia awaiting in the future. But it's a very easily a version of this film where it's a nightmare for a company to have power over that.
And but I so enjoyed it as a moment of, it brought lightness at moments. There was that wonderful scene in the office where we assume that the user is signing this user agreement, and it's just, it added this very subtle moment of relief, because obviously the film's content can be, it could be quite serious, and I really enjoyed how it functioned in that way. It was sort of unexpected.
I was very conscious of trying to find some elements of reprieve, I guess, from the sort of more sadder aspects of the film. One is obviously, there's sort of humour to be found in the device and the sort of parallels between what we know. I think also the character of Doug's supposed to be someone who is a little bit silly. He's a guy who's sort of lived on his own for a long time without sort of social scrutiny, and so his behaviours has become something that's probably, he's very used to not being watched, so a little less than self-conscious. So,
On that, with your performance, Ian, would you say there were any other films or roles that, excuse me, you really drew from as inspiration for Doug?
I don't know if anyone remembers a Ken Loach film called Kess. Back in 1969, black and white, gritty northern drama about this young kid who befriends, he has a horrible life, he befriends a kestrel, and then for some really injustice point, his brother gives him some money to go to the betting shop, and he goes and buys some chips with it instead. And so his brother kills, sorry, spoiler alert, the kestrel. And I was watching this at home, or black and white TV. There was no social media at that time, so you could never know what was going on. And I watched this boy enact this thing, and then there was a sad moment with this poor dead kestrel, and it broke my heart. In fact, David Bailey, who played the character, who's now 70 years old, said he can't see the film again because it's just too depressing. So whenever I need to go to that space, I think about that film and how it just broke my heart. It's a very, very sad film, and completely the injustice of killing someone's favourite creature because they didn't, put your bet on. Just tragic. I hope
you don't feel like this watching Heel that you can't watch it again.
Well, that's where I got. I think I'll probably keep it somewhere.
And so I also wanted to, the sort of theme of this conversation has really been about time and thinking about time. And I'm very curious about the duration of this film. So it sits at 40 minutes, and it's quite a tricky duration in the sense that it's almost too long for a short film, but then too short for a feature film. So I wanted to ask you about that. Was there a particular rationale behind the 40 minutes, or did it happen quite organically through that process?
Organically. I thought I was setting out to make a film that ran between 20 and 30 minutes, which is still long for a short film. If anyone here is planning to make films with festivals in mind, keep it short. Lack of wisdom, probably, but I think the film runs the time it's meant to run. I thought about cutting it down further, but every time I thought about cutting something else out, it just felt like I'd be losing something. So it does struggle to find a place amongst like short films as far as festivals and stuff like that, but I'm proud of what it is, and I feel like the length works for the story I'm telling. So yeah, probably wouldn't change that, but
could have made it longer because there could have been bit extensions in some of those.
Yeah, look, I think if I had known now if I knew then what I know now, whether or not compiling a few more resources, spending a little bit more time and turning it into a feature. I think Doug's story is pretty well told in this, but I always saw so much more potential in Barbara. So I think there is a side of that story to tell. Importantly, we're talking about time and that location. I'd never thought about sort of expanding more on what that future is. To me, what that sort of mystery of the larger world and what the future holds would always sort of remain sort of out of sight. I sort of love a bit of mystery in that regard. Some of my favourite films growing up, Blade Runner with the concept of off-world, or the original like Alien film, like the space jockey's ship and stuff like that, leaving something for the audience to fill in with their own imagination, I find far more rewarding than sort of the actual facts of what's going on. So
is there a Heel 2? We're going to get a Heel 2 on the horizon?
Tricky one. I mean, Heel 1's kind of covered it. Otherwise, you'd just be repeating Heel 1 again, which is kind of, I think it's self-contained, that film.
Yeah. No, I think, again, if there was any future to it, it would be to expand it out.
The Arlo's film, make his story bigger. He's got a lot of screen time.
But I think I've told the story I want to tell here, so I'm not sure how much more there'd be necessarily to mine there. I think, I've grown a lot since I started conceiving of this project, so it would innately be a different film now if I was to make it now. Again, as I said, I find a lot of humour in the idea of a company building a device like that. I don't necessarily think I could find the same humour now. So...
And thinking about, actors and who was working on the film, obviously we need to speak about Arlo. What fantastic dog acting. Can I say dog acting? Is that the correct term?
Yeah.
I think that's the right term.
There's a saying again, they say never work with children or animals, but I think Pieces with children and This one is now
Dog was
animals.
easier.
So the next film, but actually I quite like working with children and animals because they're much more, they're less dramatic, if you like. Actors can get really, I mean, I thought there's bits in there, I said, just not so much, you know, and you just want to go, hey, just be. And Arlo was a really good being dog. And yeah, I mean,
We specifically, fortunate someone here who put me in contact with the owner of the dog, who was excited to come on board the project at the prospect of having that dog be a movie star. But it wasn't a screen-trained dog it was just a very well-trained dog. And I think that allows it to continue to be a sort of a dog that we recognise. And more specifically, I think we did 2 sort of longer days of filming with the dog, and considering the sort of schedule and stuff, I'd sort of set up for a plan B and a plan C of if the dog wasn't behaving, but I specifically wrote into the script that it wouldn't do anything a normal dog wouldn't do, and as long as it did it within the frame of the camera, it sort of did. But turns out...
I don't remember waiting for Arlo out of his trailer, you know. Come on, we're all here.
Plus, the happy accidents, the look... when Arlo is sitting next to the passed-out drunk Doug, there's, I think, quite profound, and I'm not sure how much that's me projecting onto it. But that and when you meet it out on the past version of yourself meets Arlo for the first time on the porch, and it just happens to sit down in front of you. That was totally accidental, but...
totally.
Yeah.
Arlo's actually... Girl or boy, I can never work it out.
Girl.
It is girl, because it's like... just keeps moving from one gender to the other.
There was I think I made it easy for myself because when I was writing the script, the dog had a different name, and then when I got introduced to the dog, it made sense like, oh, this will be a nightmare trying to call a dog by a name other than its own, so we called it Arlo in the script. So, you know.
Oh, and something else that really, aside from obviously Arlo's incredible performance and timing, something else that struck me was the sound and the sound design, and also the composition of the music. It was so incredibly beautiful. And could you tell me a bit about how you worked and engineered all of that design and consideration?
I spent a significant amount of time doing the sound design. Probably not a whole lot of wisdom when it's the director doing it, because there can be a bit of a perfectionist. But with an environment that is that sort of still and quiet, the sound design's equally important because it starts to feel very unnatural very, very quickly if things that you're expecting to hear aren't there. So there's a lot of small details in the background just to keep it sounding relatively natural, and combination of, we had great sound recording out there, but building out a suite of sound effects to sort of build up the environments and stuff like that. Most of the Foley throughout the film is from, if not from our recordings, Australian recordings, to make sure that like the nature is as it should sound, although there may be some birds in there that are from further south, I'm not sure.
Well, I'm aware that we are running quite close to time, so I'm just going to try and sneak in one very last question, which is, I just can't help myself, it's a little bit of a cute question. But if you could go back in time and change one thing about this film, to both of you, what would it be?
It would be the bottle part. I would say, look, I know Doug's chucking it away, but Ian doesn't want to, so Ian's going to go and put it in a recycling bin somewhere.
We were talking about it earlier. You've thrown it just in the right spot for a lawnmower to run it over. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I just thought, he's going to burn down his own farm because it just seemed the wrong thing to do. But you said, just do it. And I said, okay, just do it. It's not it's not me, it's Doug doing this. Throw it away, it's just Doug. And maybe, I don't know, there's a couple of moments I would have loved to have just had another go at maybe, but we didn't have the time. So he would go, cut, that's great, move on. And I go, but can I just do one more? No.
Yeah, the amount of time we had to do it in probably propelled us in good ways, but there were often times where you'd always like more time to play.
But then you just indulge yourself. But it was like 1 or 2 takes on each one. Really, I don't remember you going back and saying, Ian, do it again, better. Literally we didn't have the time, and it was like, it was great. Didn't knock anything over. Move on. So,
So would that be yours, Thomas? Would it be to have more time? Is that...
No, I mean, I stretched every resource and thing I had at the time, so that, and I got incredibly lucky. As I said, we didn't dodge COVID, but so many things could have fallen over in a way that perhaps would have made this film impossible to complete.
Even the weather was on
it was
our
raining
side
the day before. It had been days of rain before. It cleared up the morning of the shoot, and then it started raining as we wrapped on the final day.
Wow.
So we had cars drifting on the muddy
in fact,
road
we
back
got
out.
stuck on the way out. Some of that had to get through the mud.
My car
get
got
up
bogged on the way in the day before the shoot, and I exerted probably a silly amount of energy getting it out. So,
well, despite all obstacles, we are so pleased that it came together to make this wonderful short film. So I would like to take this opportunity to wrap up our very short in conversation and thank you both again for being here with us today. I'd also like to thank our presenting partner Crumpler, who have presented and helped us with the Asia Pacific Triennial Cinema program, our wonderful technical team, a huge thank you to them, and of course, thank you all for being here with us today.